The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. Today on Uniquely Human, the podcast, we are thrilled and excited, and we'll probably get more excited as we go on, to have Dr. Shelley Moore with us today. So hi, Shelley.
Oh, hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here.
Yes. And it's great to have you, I mean, for many reasons, but one reason in particular is, as you do, I also do a lot of in-school and classroom consulting, and many of our guests are on different topics, or that's not their area of focus. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to talk about.
Let's do it.
But first, a little bit about you. Okay. So Dr. Shelley Moore is based in British Columbia, one of my favorite places in the world. And she is a highly sought after inclusive education researcher, teacher, speaker, consultant, and something near to my heart, storyteller.
My favorite part.
She has worked with school districts and community organizations around the world, and her research explores how to support teachers to design for all learners in grade-level academic classrooms that include students with intellectual disabilities. And your focus, which of course is why we're having you, is on strength-based and responsive approaches.
Yes.
Shelley completed her undergraduate degree in special education at the University of Alberta, your master's at Simon Fraser University, and PhD at the University of British Columbia. And when our listeners listen to this podcast, you need to know that Shelley offers a variety of opportunities for classroom, school, district, and systems level learning through live and online trainings. Yes.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the shout out.
Oh, sure. And actually, we had the pleasure together to be on Ross Green's Lives in the Balance Summit recently, and boy,
Yes.
did you energize the audience!
Man.
I was in the audience. So.
Well, if you felt energized, then I'm happy.
Yeah. So we want to know what makes Dr. Shelley Moore, Dr. Shelley Moore. So if you could tell us a little bit about your journey, your career, and especially what led you to focusing on inclusion and supporting schools.
Yeah, that's a good question. So oh man, where should we even start? You know what I'm going to start with? I'm going to start with one of my favorite people, Dan Habib. Do you know Dan Habib?
I do not know Dan.
So Dan Habib is a parent, first of all, parent advocate. He's also a filmmaker. His son is Samuel Habib, who just won an Emmy for his video. And so he's a self-advocate. And so he was, Dan Habib was an early kind of guiding light for me as an educator trying to do this work. And so I sought out to see him at a conference he was speaking in Vancouver, and I was so excited to talk to him. And at the time, I was working in a high school, secondary school, grades 8 to 12, supporting students with intellectual disabilities and really trying to figure out what inclusion meant for them, because I had this like feeling in my gut that being in the corner of the school was not inclusion. But a lot of people thought it was, right? And that joining phys ed class was enough. And I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. And so he was a guiding light because he seemed to like have this, he has a TED Talk called Disabling Segregation. And it just was just like, yes, like this is possible. So I talked to Dan and I'm all excited. And Dan says to me, Shelley, why are you so excited about this? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, why is inclusion your mountain? I'm like, because it's important, Dan. He's like, well, yeah, it's important, but why is it important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is this your mountain? And in that moment, I couldn't answer him. And I was like in my first 5, 6 years of teaching. So this is the early 2000s. And I didn't know the answer to that. And he's like, if you want people to follow you, you need to know why you're climbing this mountain because it's not easy to climb a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really need to like, know why. And he's like, because it's easier to come back down a mountain than it is to go up. And I always kind of held on to that. So I really kind of spent some time thinking about like why there's a lot of mountains to climb.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this my mountain? And I was kind of brought back to these key moments in my own educational journey. And I think what I kind of came around to was just like I hated school. I absolutely hated it. When I was in grade 3, that was the year that I was diagnosed with having a learning disability and ADHD, which really just manifested with a lot of challenging behavior and just disengagement, a profile that we often see. And then when I got to
You had challenging behavior.
oh,
I can't imagine that.
my poor mother. Because I have this like button, this like rage of injustice that has followed
Mm-hmm.
me my whole life that
Mm-hmm.
like I will just blow my top if something is unfair. And maybe when I was young that was about, the size of cake was not the same, but like as I'm an adult, this is like like fundamental human rights. And so this will make me flip my lid more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so like looking back on this, so I already know that I'm struggling in school and that school's not a place where I feel successful. And then I get to grade 7, which is junior high in Alberta where I grew up. And so I already know that I'm a little disabled. This is also the year that I get a little chubby and realize I might be a little gay. And so this is not a great combination in a super conservative province to
Yes.
like
This would have been the 1990s, you're saying?
the 1990s, like
Oh, yeah.
just
Yeah.
throw me off a cliff.
Holy
So like
smokes.
like and so we talk about inclusion as like we want kids to feel belonging and safety and community. I felt none of those things
Mm-hmm.
throughout like I barely survived. And I always make the joke like there's no anti-bullying campaigns in the early 90s. There's no
Right.
pink shirt day. So I made my own campaign, which was beat up my bully campaign, but then I get expelled. So it's just this one thing after the next. And so like when I slowly claw my way through the public education system, I'm like, I'm going to do one of two things: never go back to school, or I'm going to become a teacher and infiltrate this nonsense from the inside. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to go into education and work with kids like me, kids with kind of my similar profile. And that's not what happened. I mean, it started that way, but then I kind of got like enveloped into the world of intellectual disability. And then I realized in like 5 seconds that the secret of education lives with students with intellectual disabilities, because I'm like, what they need are what just really obvious examples of what everybody needs. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, if we can get to our kids who are the hardest to reach, we're going to get the little Shelleys out there, and we're going to get a whole lot of kids, a whole lot more kids than just the little Shelleys by aiming for the edges, which is where the whole bowling metaphor came from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's change the what will I say? The new ideas that we need to affect change are coming
Yeah.
from the borders, from the edges, from the far reaches.
Well, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've
Yeah.
been taught in education to eliminate the edges,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
To restrict the range. And what we're seeing as our classrooms get more and more diverse every day is we're running out of places to send the edges. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but if you take away the edges, you're just left with new edges. And so part of this is like the day we realize this and actually lean into, let's design for the edges, this work is going to get a whole lot easier.
I
Yes.
love this. Were you let me ask you this. You had a learning or intellectual disability, and do you think that that's true, or do you think that you weren't learning in a way that was compatible with the system that was set up to hit the C
I
students, the
mean,
center of the road students?
Mm,
probably a little bit of both. Like even today, like, how my learning is affected, I can see it in myself, right? Like, um, anything that's linear is very difficult for me. Writing is very, very difficult for me. Executive functioning is very, like, I have a whole
Yeah.
team, or I will
mhm,
be wandering around, right? Like, so like there are definitely elements of my neurodivergence that I definitely need more support for.
mhm,
However, what I did learn, and this wasn't until I got to my graduate studies, was that there is another way to learn, right? Like my graduate program was very, very inquiry oriented and very anchored in universal design for learning, where I could show my learning in any way. And I was like, the relevance of inquiry and the
mhm,
flexibility of that universal design for learning of expression, I absolutely flourished. Like I was top of the class, scholarships to PhD, like, and I was like, I'm the same person.
mhm,
I'm the same person. Nothing was
mhm,
fixed or changed. Just the conditions for my learning changed. And that's when I realized it was through that program that I realized that I learned through story.
hmm.
And
You-
that others learn through story. And I'm like, if I had learned this at 12, maybe I would have done a little bit better, but that it wasn't even an option around what counts as learning when I was growing up. And so, now that I'm in my mid 40s, I can finally say, I know what my strengths are. I know what my stretches are. I
mhm,
know what my needs are.
mhm,
And so being able to like harness those areas of strengths to support me in other areas, I'm able to navigate quite successfully in the world. And I just was like, I'm like, why can't this be part of that
mhm,
structure from day one? Like, why did I
mhm.
have to wait till I was 40?
So it almost sounds as if what began as a kind of intuitive, internalized social justice motivation then really moved
Whew.
ahead and had you
Mm.
really dig in to, you know, self-reflecting, but also reflecting on
Mm.
schools and different learning styles. So I'm going to come back. You just did address this,
Okay.
but I'm going to pull a quote from you,
Okay.
and just to make sure our listeners are embracing this and taking it home. And
Okay.
the quote from Dr. Shelley Moore is, all students can learn even if it looks different or sounds different than we expect.
Yeah.
So if you could not only expand upon that, but
Yeah.
why there tends to be pushback against that, or why educational
Yeah.
systems continue to develop, maybe paying lip service to this, but not doing the deep dive.
I love this because I just had a conversation yesterday with a team, and I really feel for school-based staff right now, because in this session that I was given, we were talking about like curricular frameworks and assessment, and how like one of the key ideas of universal design is firm goals, flexible means. Okay. And that means that you need to know what the learning standards are. And so that is connected to a backwards design process. So that makes sense. But what's happening is jurisdictions are telling teachers you have to use universal design for learning, but they're still within a forwards design process. And so this particular group was like, they want us to do universal design for learning, but they also have to take a standardized test at the end of the term that's worth 60% of their grade. And I'm like, you cannot UDL in a forwards design process, which is firm task, flexible goals, right? It's the opposite of backwards design. And so, like, it's so obvious, but it's so frustrating because they're actually contradictory learning models that teachers are being forced to navigate, because there's such misunderstanding between what are the actual conditions for learning. And so, like, a great example of this is, when I was in high school, the only evidence of learning that was valid was timed essays, multiple choice tests, and like the occasional worksheet. No, that doesn't align with any of my learning.
Mm,
And, and so I never did well. I never did well. But like recently I was in New Zealand,
mhm,
and my daughter and I, she's 4, okay, we're walking on the beach in New Zealand. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but apparently what surfers do is they put giant logs vertical in the sand so they have a reference point in the water.
Hmm.
But I didn't know this. I just thought it looked like a giant threw a log like a spear and it landed in the sand standing up. So this is like a giant, probably 20, 25-foot log standing up. And I think this is so cool. But we're really far away from it. And so Meta, my daughter, she's like, Mama, look at that small twig in the sand. And I'm like, that's not small, Meta. Like, let's go see. So she picks up another stick and she's like, look, see, this one's bigger. And I'm like, you know what? Let's go test this out. So we walk closer to the log. And as we get closer, because of perspective, the log gets bigger. So we have this whole incredible learning experience where she's realizing that the closer you are, the bigger something is, and the further away you are, the smaller something is.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is such an incredible learning experience that we have evidence for. Like, I took a video of it, we have a conversation about it. And I'm like, in a universal design for learning context, that counts as evidence of learning.
Mhm.
In a
Mhm.
backwards design learning context, that counts as evidence. In a forwards design, in a standardized context, it doesn't count.
Mhm.
And so it's thinking about this like, if we can actually take a step back and say that learning can be captured in more than just on paper
Yeah.
and in a classroom between the hours of 9 and 3,
Mhm.
we're going to start to realize that there are so many kids who are learning all the time.
Mhm.
And what I love about this the most is that like this idea that learning happens through experiences and story
Absolutely.
is such an inclusive concept that's so deeply rooted in indigenous pedagogy that
Mhm.
you're starting to start to realize that this isn't new.
Mhm.
This isn't new. This has been part of learning for time immemorial. And so it's not an innovative, this is not innovative. This is
Mhm.
actually realizing that we're trying to decolonize our learning here. And once we kind of see it as that, you realize how huge the impact of just reframing learning like that can have on so many students.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's so I'm saying this shooting from the hip. I'm not a,
Yeah.
pedagogical anything, right? I'm
Hmm.
basically a
Hmm.
moron with a microphone. I am the United States.
Oh,
I
Dave.
mean, I have more hope. I have more hope in you than that, my friend.
Whoops. I think there might have to be an edit on this one.
But anyway, I will say that it feels like what so the post colonization model versus indigenous model. I never
Mhm.
thought of it that way, and
Mhm.
one thing that I know about the post colonial model is make people really good factory workers and
Yeah, at
taxpayers.
being the same. At being the same. It's
Yeah.
it's
Right.
it's driven by the economy. It's driven by, like manufacturing and industry. It's not the root motivation there is not learning.
No, no, no.
And so if we really want to talk about this, if we really want to dig in, there's some unlearning that has to happen and sometimes hard conversations around what are we trying to do here.
Hmm.
But the irony is that if you actually look at what the skills are in demand in society today, they no longer align with the industry and factory model
Hmm.
of when public education was created. So I mean, like from every angle, we're seeing that this historical school model is not working for more and more kids, but people just
Hmm.
hold on to it like
Yeah.
it's the only thing. And I'm like, guys, we gotta evolve, we gotta move forward, or we're just losing kids,
Yeah. I mean,
losing kids and families.
how has learning become decontextualized? I'm
Hmm.
lucky enough that I was from very early on in my career. I had wonderful mentors who were deeply, deeply involved in
Hmm.
developmental processes,
Hmm.
and I always like to say I'm a speech language pathologist, but my training really is in child and human development, emotional development, social development.
Hmm.
And it was always about learning happens in every activity, in every
All the
interaction.
time.
And I think I know your feelings about this, and you may know mine. But when it came specifically to teaching students who had a diagnosis of autism, all of a
Hmm.
sudden the best, quote unquote, the best, not accurate,
Yeah.
learning became just almost an extreme example of decontextualized learning.
Oh yeah.
We're going to teach you every little skill
Yeah,
and
yeah.
jump when we say jump and you know the whole story, but it's not going to have to do with any flow of
Anything.
activity you experience in your life. And it's not first you have to do it here, and then maybe
Yeah.
we'll allow there, and then we'll measure progress over there. I
Well,
mean,
and this reflects another. I mean, we could like just like talk about all the problems, you guys, all day. But like what speaking specifically about this and the decontextualized learning, specifically for autism and for intellectual disability, is that there's this outdated ableist assumption that learning can only be captured by someone else.
mm-hmm.
Right. And so that decontextualized learning, which has become very observable and behavioral based, is why IEPs are filled with these SMART goals that have no connection or relevance to shared curriculum with peers at all. And so this is my other mountain, is to blow up SMART goals, because they're so ableist in this idea of, wait a second, like maybe you don't do it 96% of the time, but you can do it within a context. Right. And you could do it in multiple contexts, and you can apply it in different ways. And maybe it's not something you master. Maybe it's something you work on forever, you know? And so I think like there's this idea that this group of kids can't learn or can't think, and therefore can only behave
Mm-hmm.
or can only exist in a behaviorally based or functional way. And it's such an outdated and ableist way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the work that we're trying to do now is to really update our IEPs to reflect a more kind of like contextualized and authentic learning context for students with autism and intellectual disabilities, because it's how can you possibly include students who are learning these micro skills that are decontextualized in a classroom with curriculum that is actually counteractive to that?
Mm-hmm.
So, so what I'm hearing here is context. So basically, the thing that I always say is public school insists that everybody be a top student in every subject. And then you get into the
Right.
real world and they're like, no, we need you to be good at accounting. So I don't care if you're a biology
Yeah.
wizard,
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
Right? But we all
Nobody
have
looks
to,
at my grades.
no. And it's like, but if you don't get those grades, you don't go to college and yakety
Yeah.
yak. So
Yeah.
when you're talking, what is meant by contextualized versus decontextualized? Do you mean like
Mm.
somebody frames it for you, like why we're learning this, or what?
It's a really good example of this. And I got this example from Norman Coates, who is a disability self-advocate in British Columbia, who I followed a long time. And so what often happens in special education is we'll have these students that have whatever intervention or lagging skills that have been identified, and they get kind of pulled out, or they receive this kind of like really intense intervention, often in another place. And Norman Kuntz says, that kind of model is kind of like pulling a kid out of a swimming pool, teaching them how to swim in a parking lot, and
That's
then
right.
dropping them in the water, right? And so it's like we're teaching all these micro skills, but there's no place to actually apply them. And then what happened is we're like, okay, so let's make this more inclusive. So now what's happening is they have these interventions that might be in a classroom with peers, but now it's like, let's teach these kids how to swim in a pool, but they never get to jump in the lake with their friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They never get to actually go to free public swim and go down the water slide. And so, like, yes, everyone needs to learn how to swim, but without that kind of universal, joyful, playful context, whether we are talking about social skills, communication, or literacy, we lose the element of application, and we lose the impact of the skill teaching.
Mm-hmm. And it also flies in the face of what we know about cognitive development in human beings. I
Exactly.
mean, we develop our, and to toss out a little bit of jargon here, our
Yeah.
cognitive schema of life
Right.
through activities, through relationships in those
shared
activities.
shared experiences. When you're teaching these like skills of how to swim, or
Yep.
skills of how to read, or skills of whatever, fill in the blank, when you actually get to the unpredictable and authentic birthday party swim experience, you know what I mean? Not everyone's doing the same thing.
That's right.
Right? Not everyone is jumping off the high board. Not everyone is doing laps. Not everyone, some kids have earplugs, some kids have nose plugs. Like there's so many variations to what it means to swim in a pool, but
That's
I feel
right.
like we have zoned into like swimming means this, swimming looks like this, and if you don't do it, you're not growing and you're not successful.
That's right.
Whereas what I'm trying to say is like, isn't the ultimate in success like being able to go to a swimming pool and having a shared experience with peers, whether that or not that looks the same or not. And so
Yes.
like maybe we don't have to read the same book. Maybe
And
we don't have to communicate in the same way to
yeah.
have that shared
And
experience.
and not only that, but what neurodiversity teaches us is maybe one child swims one way as opposed to another way because swimming that way is a better match for their brain.
Totally. Totally. I mean, like there's unlimited ways to have a successful experience in a free swim.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Now, if you're competing in the Olympics, there are
Yes,
parameters on what freestyle swimming means, what backstroke swimming means.
totally.
Completely separate, but not everybody's training to be an Olympic
That's
swimmer.
right.
Not
No,
everybody's training to
Yes.
be
no.
a
But
professor.
even but even Olympic swimmers still have free pool time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's not a reduction of Olympic swimming. It's actually foundational. Like you talk to any Olympic swimmer, I guarantee you they will say they have a love of water somewhere in their childhood
There you go.
because they felt success and they felt joy. And if we don't have that, whether you're a top elite athlete or someone who just likes to take a hot bath on Friday nights, like there's something about water that people are connected to. And we could, and like that's the same thing. We could do structured reading every day for 25 hours a day, but if you don't get to read before bed with your mom, what's the point?
Yes.
Right. It becomes a chore.
Like,
Like these
that's it.
adults are forcing my hand to read this. I don't want to
You
read.
know,
Yeah.
like, and
Totally.
I think that that's the part I think that often we miss in those inclusive contexts is yes,
Mhm.
there's a time and a place for skill development, but we cannot lose the joy. We cannot use the play because those two are the ultimate in context, the ultimate in universality, the ultimate in authenticity of shared experiences.
Yes. Well, and we actually kind of say that in our search model. We kind of say, wait a second,
Yeah.
we call it an
Yeah.
activity-based model. And then what we
Mm-hmm.
say is, I mean, you know, that is the dog that wags the tail. It's the cohesive
Yes.
everyday experiences and activities within which you learn skills to feel competent
100%.
and successful in doing that.
And I think sometimes we forget that one of the biggest supports for kids is other kids. Like
Yes.
even just the co-regulation and the co-referencing that happens when you're with other kids in a pool or other kids in an activity, like, just having a diverse group together is in itself a teacher.
Yes. So what do you see when you see inclusion working as opposed to, lip service,
Mm,
such as just
yeah.
physical inclusion, not real inclusion? What do you see going on? What are some of the elements
Yeah.
that we have so many parents who listen to our
Oh,
podcast?
yes.
So,
Okay.
so what lights your fire when you say,
Okay,
yeah?
here. This is it. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through it because this was one of my research questions.
Okay.
Okay. What does this look like? And for parents who are listening, what can we advocate for? Okay, ready?
Yes.
Number one, it's the most important. Are all students in a community, are all of them presumed competent? Are all of them seen as having a contribution to that community? And it's that connected to that positive attitudes. And it's the easiest and the hardest one. It's the easiest because it's free. It costs zero resources to have a positive attitude and to presume competence and potential in all students.
Hmm.
But it's the hardest because you can't force it on anyone. And it's educators mean well, but we have all been conditioned to look for what's wrong because
Hmm.
education, especially special education, evolved out of the medical model. And so this is really, really taking that step back to say, let's stop norm referencing and look for the strengths and look for the contributions of every single child in your classroom. It's
Hmm.
essential. We cannot go further unless we can do that. Number two, students have to actually be enrolled in inclusive classrooms. And I know that sounds so obvious, but it is so hard to do that when kids are in different schools.
Hmm.
And so this is why I am such a huge advocate for neighborhood schools because I can appreciate that it might take some students longer to increase shared experience with peers. I totally get that. But if they are not in the same building with their peers, it's going to be the barriers are 10 times higher if they're in a school down the road.
Hmm.
And so actually creating neighborhood schools where you go to the school that's in your neighborhood, and you can have different spaces within that school for kids to regulate, but the goal is always to increase the opportunities for students to have shared experiences with their peers. And you cannot do that if we're in a site down the road.
Hmm.
So presuming competence, placement. Now I say place purposefully, inclusive places purposely, because when I say place, I don't mean location. So place-based planning is again rooted in Indigenous pedagogy, where our criteria for inclusion is not just enrollment in a location, but we have a sense of where we are, who we are when we're there, and who we're with when we're there. And so it's a
Hmm.
sense of kind of responsibility as an individual to ourselves, to each other, and to the place that we're in. And so none of that is breathing the same air.
Hmm.
That's looking at roles and responsibilities and really, like thinking about and talking about what are the different purposes to my placement here. And so that really starts to look at IEPs and how IEPs are connected to that place. My next project. So we have presuming competence,
Yep.
we have placement,
Hmm.
we have the purposes and how they're connected to that place. And then we have, I call them the 5 Ps: presuming competence, inclusive placement, purposeful goals.
Hmm.
Number 4 is the role of peers.
Hmm.
Shared participation with peers, which this also then talks about the role of the adults, because I mean, I'm sure you both know that the number one advocated resource for inclusive education is a one-to-one paraprofessional. But we know that research tells us that it actually it inhibits the goals of inclusion.
Hmm.
Well-meaning, unknowing people are becoming the barrier. And so that's not to say we don't need paraprofessionals, but it's thinking about how do we use the adults to facilitate shared experiences with peers, as
Hmm.
opposed to using adults to help one student finish a task,
Hmm.
which is often how they're used. And the 5th P is my favorite P, and this one is my specific research area, which is planning for everyone from the start.
Hmm.
Now, this is harder than it sounds because as a special educator, I was taught to plan for most and then adapt and modify. And that's not what this is. This is how do we plan for the edges from the start so that you
Yes.
don't have to adapt and modify. And so that's really looking at that question of how do we design for accessibility and for challenge at the same time without sacrificing one over the other. So I call those the 5 Ps. And when I'm looking for an inclusive classroom, that's what I'm looking for. Attitudes towards inclusion. Are kids placed purposely in classrooms? How are they interacting and shared experience with peers? And how are we supporting teachers to plan for all kids from the start?
Hmm.
5 Ps. Oh, it is. And you know what? It's a doozy because it's an actual shift in practice and thinking. We have to unlearn retrofitting,
Hmm.
which is the most inefficient model of planning, but it's how all of us were taught. And so it's you have to be a little vulnerable and as an educator to say, I maybe was taught this wrong. Maybe I have to unlearn a bit,
Hmm.
have to be a bit humble. I got to work with people. Like it's it's uncomfortable, but let me tell you, when you see it, you can't unsee it.
Hmm.
It's art. It is art. And you can, and so my research was working with secondary academic classrooms that had a student with an intellectual disability enrolled in the class. And then we worked with the teachers on how to take grade level curriculum and make it accessible without sacrificing challenge, like really designing for those edges. And let me tell you, 2 of those students who had none of the prerequisites for those courses actually showed evidence of grade level and got credit for the courses. One of the teachers cried and she was like, "We've been told that this isn't possible.
Hmm.
We've been told that the reason why these kids are in life skills classes is because they can't do this.
That's right. Right.
And look at this, they can.
Yep. The
What
kids
does
come
that
in,
mean?"
the kids are given a reputation that
Yep.
sticks, and everybody
Yeah.
looks through that lens. Yeah.
Yeah. And well-meaning people, what like
Yes. Yeah.
lovely, well-meaning people really think that kids need life skills because that's what's best for them until they see that it's not. And then all of a sudden you have another advocate that's like, we have to change everything because this is not equitable.
Hmm.
So Katie Novak has a quote that I love. It
Mm-hmm.
is, when the conditions are right, everyone can be successful.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is it puts the emphasis on changing the conditions, not changing the student.
Yes.
And so that is the work, is how do we support the conditions, because kids can do it.
Right.
They
And
can
that's
do it.
similar to Ross Greene's famous quote.
Yes.
So
If they
kids
do well, if they
kids do well
can.
if they can, right?
Ross. Good old Ross.
But it's just wow. So let me bring up an issue that I know is of such heightened concern, especially for parents, and that's the
Yeah.
issue of bullying. Okay.
Yeah.
So you will hear some people say, and I'm sure you've heard it,
Yeah.
well, we want our child in a special class or a special school because we
Yeah.
don't want them to be in the mainstream and get bullied.
Right.
So speak to that conception or
Yeah.
misconception. Yeah.
So, I'll tell you one thing right now is that when kids grow up together, they don't bully each
Yep,
other.
right.
Okay, so in British Columbia, we went through intentional closing down of segregated schools 40 years ago. Okay, so kids go to their neighborhood school. It's not perfect. We have
Mm-hmm.
a long ways to go, but kids from day one, kindergarten, they go to school together. And let me tell you, there is bullying, but it's not towards kids with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And an interesting quote, because I interviewed students in the high schools for my research, and I asked them, like, what is it like having like a student with an intellectual disability in your class? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's it like? And one of the students, non-disabled, looks at me. He's like, I don't understand the question. And I'm like, well, what's it like? He's like, well, I feel like you're asking me, like, what's it like that water's wet?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I don't know any difference. Like, Dylan's been in our class since kindergarten. I can't even imagine him
Mm-hmm.
not being there. And so I think a really big part of this is when kids grow up together as part of a cohort, kids don't bully each other. They become a family, okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, if bullying happens for any student, regardless of it's for disability or not, that's a community issue that needs to be addressed
Mm-hmm.
regardless. And that's not about the student, that's about the community. And often the person who's doing the bullying is the one that needs the most support. And so, when you look at actual
Mm-hmm.
support around bullying, bullying is a symptom like so many other behavioral concerns. And so you'll start to see in a lot of curricular reform, there's something called competencies that are becoming a part of curriculum. So here in British Columbia, we have something called core competencies. And part of that is looking at, like, how do we develop skills in social responsibility? How do we develop skills in valuing diversity and being personally aware? And so, like, if we have a class where bullying is an issue for anybody, regardless of who's getting bullied and who's doing bullying, that's actually an indicator that the community needs support. And that's when we're going to zoom in
Mm-hmm.
and say, how do we teach some skills to the whole class around how to respect and value each other as humans in this way? So I don't even see bullying as a disability issue. I
Mm-hmm.
see bullying in general as a community
Community
issue that
issue.
should be addressed regardless of
Mm-hmm.
who is and isn't doing the bullying and receiving or giving the bullying.
And I don't want to be the semantics guy, but I think there is a clear distinction too between, when you say when children are in a peer cohort,
Yeah.
you're protected from bullying because you're not doing that.
You have bodyguards.
You have
gotta
bodyguards.
You have bodyguards.
Yeah.
But there are cohorts where they enjoy busting chops
Yeah.
and teasing. And the problem is I had friends who were a teasing friend group.
Yeah.
And I don't tease. It infuriates me because I actually take it personally and I don't understand
I get it.
So I was always the one who was like freaking out when they would tease me. Now I understand it and I can take the jokes and I can teach back. But like I want to make sure parents too are understanding that like you're going to get your chops busted no matter what. Bullying is like a truly unsafe.
Yeah, because that's it. We
Know.
don't want anyone to feel unsafe. But I think the response often when someone is bullied is to remove them. And I get that, especially as a parent. Now that I'm a parent, I absolutely get that. But the actual response to bullying is to lean in and to actually say to the community what is going on here, because there's something bigger that's going on here than just bullying towards this one student, right? And that often is not about the removal of the kid being bullied, but actually like instructional skills for the people doing the bullying. You know, because they're often the ones that need the support more than anyone else.
And also top down support from the administrators making
Oh,
this
100%.
open communication about this. This is not something we
100%.
hide in the
No.
little side rooms, you know. So yeah.
No, like if I was a leader and anyone came to me that one kid in my school was getting bullied, we would have a whole school reflection and instructional plan on how to build community in that building.
Yes.
Because you cannot learn if there's bullying happening in a school.
Yes.
That's a systemic issue, and that means that kids need support, more support than they're getting.
And it really is. I'm gonna just tell a quick story here. I was involved a few months ago with Lisa Morgan, who is an autistic suicidologist. She's a specialist, and we were asked to give a little seminar following a very unfortunate, tragic episode where a college student died by suicide because, without going into specifics, essentially one of his teachers actually kind of bullied him as a teacher can bully the way he responded. It was a bullying response. And they decided, no, that this is a whole community issue.
It's a community issue.
We need to have all the faculty learn a little bit more. What are the risk factors, etc. And they felt good about it. It's only one step of many steps that need to be taken. But to embrace it that way, and as what you're saying, it's so important. Community level.
Bullying is very serious. And I think sometimes it gets brushed off as, oh, well, they're bullying because they're disabled. And you're like, no, it has nothing to do with disability. It has to do with power dynamics, and it has to do with privilege, and it has to do with, there's so many things that it has to do with. And I think that, like, if you're listening to this and you're a leader, like, you nip that in the bud, because if you don't have that sense of community, it's not just bullying that's going to happen, and there's a whole lot more other things down the line, and it's a real and important issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Yeah, not every victim is going to take the uppercut to the bully's jaw like you did and solve it on their own.
I mean, it felt so good though.
I want to ask you, how good did that feel? I've never taken a swing on somebody, and I just would love it.
Well, I mean, I would love to tell you that I did it well, but I mean, like, I'd never gotten to a fight before, so I think I probably missed her, and then I grabbed her hair or something. Like, it wasn't heroic. It probably looked like it probably looked.
It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be heroic. It just needs to set the tone.
But what was really interesting is I held like deep resentment to this person.
Yeah, sure.
Who was my bully for decades. And as an adult, because this happened when I was 12, and as an adult, she reached out to me. And I was like, and I don't know if you remember back in the day, like, and I'm like 30 years old when this happens. Okay, so do you remember back in the day, Facebook would say, like, when you became friends with someone, it said, how do you know them?
Yeah.
So that happened, and I wrote back, nemesis. And her response was, I don't get it. Like, you're my best friend.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, absolutely not. We're not best friends. Like, I got expelled because of you. She had no recollection of this.
Wow.
And so we actually met about it because I was so weirded out. I'm like, how do you not remember this? This was a defining moment in my life. Like, I was expelled because of this. And she's like, Shelley, like, you were my best friends. Like we went through elementary together. Like you came to my house all the time. And I'm like, yeah, which is why it was so awful when you turned on me in grade 7.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you know what? I'm not doubting that your experience is real. But what I can say is that when I was in grade 7, that's when my parents were getting divorced. That's when I was negotiating my own kind of like
Uh,
mental health and abuse, navigating my own family. And she's like, so I am not discrediting your story, but what I'm realizing is that like what I think I pulled from my experience of elementary and junior high is I held onto what I knew was positive, which was my friendship with you.
huh.
I did not hold on to our fight because there was so many other things going on. And so she's like, I am sorry if that's what happened,
Wow.
but that is not my memory of our relationship. And I hope that you can get to a place where you can also remember our good times as well.
Wow. Huh.
So that was a huge lesson for me
Yeah.
in knowing that often it's our bullies that have more of a story than we think.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
You only hurt the one you love, right?
And that's exactly what she said. She's just like, it breaks my heart to hear this because this is so not my memory of you.
Yes.
Like I'm getting emotions in my eyes talking about it, but it was, and I wrote about this in my book, and I said,
Mm,
for 25 years I called her my bully, and it was from that moment that I changed that, and I call her my first best friend
mm,
because she was like she moved to Edmonton when she was 8, and we were inseparable for years. So it was, hearing both sides of that story and realizing, you know what, we got to dig in. We got to dig in. As adults, we have to find out the story.
yeah. So we just learned
Mhm.
something from that story. So talk about the importance of
Mhm.
storytelling in
Oh man, you
education in
guys,
so many ways.
like, okay, so storytelling is my lifeline. Like, it's how I learn. It's become my whole job. And I never thought this was a thing. But what happened was in grad school, so I'm doing my master's. I don't want to be doing my master's. The only reason why I'm doing it is so that I get paid more than like $4 an hour. So I'm like trying to get my master's to move myself up on the pay scale. Like that's the only reason.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this kind of inquiry based cohort. And at the beginning of every one of and I'm the youngest kid, like I'm in there wearing a toque. All of these teachers are experienced and like, they're like, who's this kid over here who's hiding? And I was absolutely hiding because I hated school. So at the beginning of every class, we sit in a circle and we had to tell a story of our week. And I was at the time, I'm working in this high school with these incredible kids, and the Olympics are happening. Like, I would always have some crazy and hilarious story to tell everybody. And so I would tell a story of the week. And then what ended up happening was everyone's like, can Shelley start our stories? Because we love her stories. And so I started to get this identity of the storyteller within this cohort
Uh,
over 2 years. And then these stories started to connect to our readings. And these stories started to connect to what we were learning about. And
mm,
everyone's like, do you know that this is how you learn? And I'm like, what do you mean? Because as if I read anything. I hate reading. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they're like, you are learning through story. And I'm like, is that allowed? Is that a thing?
huh,
And so that
It
and
was a
so
thing
that
for thousands and thousands and
I know,
thousands of
but
years.
yep,
like
yep, yeah,
I don't know.
really.
In my brain, learning is I have nothing in my brain. It's filled by someone else, and then I do a timed multiple choice test at the end. That's what learning means to me. And so now all of a sudden I'm in this like, what do you mean I can tell a story? And
Yes.
so then people were like, "Oh, well, why don't you come and like do a professional development day and tell this story?" And I'm like, "Cuz that's not a thing. I'm not a speaker." And they're like, "No, you should try." And it people just because I realized that not only do I learn through story, but everybody learns through story.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
once I actually figured that out about myself, I'm like, okay, how do I connect this to a story? Because that's how it's going to make meaning for me. And then that just becomes like the content now of my whole job. So like I feel very fortunate that I was able to realize this soon enough that it could actually influence my career. But wow, the power of a story. I'm so
Hmm.
thankful. I'm so thankful for that cohort group because I didn't know that counted.
Yes. And isn't that what podcasts are about?
Isn't that what podcasts are about?
if they're done well, it's good storytelling. But one of
That's
the things
it.
that I often say, and I say this, and I kind of will put on my academic credentials,
Yeah.
and say the greatest changes in supporting people from a respectful and progressive manner um, come from self-advocate stories.
Oh,
That I mean,
yes.
you could look at the tens of millions, if not hundreds of
Hmm.
millions of dollars into large sample research over the years.
Yeah.
But what has changed our knowledge of the best way to respectfully support, if needed,
Hmm.
people who have support needs? It's
Yeah.
stories.
You talk you talk to the person.
Yeah.
My one of my favorite realizations recently is like I have these because often people will say like, well, they don't have a voice, they don't talk. They don't have a story to tell. Like this is, you know what I mean, when we're working with kids with autism or different communication needs.
Yes.
And so I always try and like I'm like, what can I say back to people to say like everyone has a voice. Sometimes we just have to be a little bit more creative, right? Like how do we dig in to find someone's story when they don't use words? Right. So I go into my office the other day, and because I've been traveling, I have three plants in there, and they're looking a little like woozy. You know, they're a little droopy. And I kind of chuckled to myself, and I'm like, are you guys telling me a story? So I like in that moment, I'm like,
Yes.
this plant is telling me what it needs. A plant.
Yes.
A plant is telling me what it needs. If a plant can tell me what it needs, every human being on this planet can tell us what it needs. We just might have to decode that a little bit different. And how do you do that? By getting to know the plant, by getting to know the students. And,
Yes.
and you learn their gestures and their movements and their sounds because there's a story in there. And if you can decode that story, which we can because plants can,
Yes.
you're going to hear some incredible self-advocate stories that you will treasure forever.
You just gave me some insight. I am what I refer to as a plant rescuer. So I have about 80, 90 house plants but I
Very.
like to go to places. I'll look to see the
Yeah.
section. I mean, not only are the plants less expensive, but the distressed plant section
Yes.
and which ones are
Yes.
saying, Barry, take me
Barry.
home.
Barry, no one's listening to me. Barry, I have a story to tell.
Wow, that's what I love about these podcasts. I learn so much.
Well, I
I
mean,
know.
there's a metaphor everywhere, my friends.
Yes.
It's it's because you know exceptional people. Like I said, if the podcast were up to my guest list, none of us would learn
Yeah.
anything. We would just float ridiculous theories about mountain biking, and that's it.
I
Dave,
mean,
I think we need a little operant conditioning. I'm going to hook you up to a little shock device. And every time you put yourself down, I'm going to.
yeah, no, stop it. Stop it.
This podcast would
Stop
not
it.
be the podcast if it was not for Dave. So,
Oh, you two are fun.
yes. So, what?
I wish we were together.
Me
Yes.
too.
And I
Up
wish we
in
had 3 more
Canada.
hours, but there is one more thing I need to ask you because
Oh,
it's
I'm ready.
near and dear
I'm
to my
ready.
heart.
I'm ready.
And I'm getting really down in the classroom now, but co-teaching
Yeah.
and the importance of co-teaching for the children and the staff.
Oh, man, co-teaching is so beautiful because it is. It's a magical relationship. And so like when you find a co-teaching partner that is this intuitive, responsive back and forth, like there is nothing better. Your workload feels manageable, your emotions are regulated, like you're going through really hard real life things with another person.
Hmm.
There's nothing better. The question for me always comes, and I'm learning about this a lot too, is how do you facilitate those relationships when it's not intuitive, right? Like, how do we create conditions for two adults to work together who maybe it's not a match made in heaven, right? Like, how do you create conditions to support those educators to work together in ways that become that become a relationship that's beneficial to them and the students. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
we bring together people for co-teaching, but we don't often teach them how to be co-teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't, we don't teach them how to actually work together, and it can't just be two people sharing a room, because we know that that's not inclusion, and it becomes divide and conquer as opposed to what it could be, which is this magical like sharing. It's like a family, right? Like we are working together to support this community. And so that's always my question, because I've been in both of those scenarios, and one was amazing and one was awful.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when I think about the awful one, it's because we didn't know each other at all, right? We didn't understand what our roles are. We didn't understand what our responsibilities were, our contributions are. And so like co-teaching is such an incredible framework and process for inclusion that I think is necessary to do
Mm-hmm.
this work. And I think that when we think about the layers of support that are needed to make that happen, we have to put resources into developing
Mm-hmm.
supports for teachers to make that happen, because we can't rely on intuition.
Mm-hmm. And
It's not enough.
for newer professionals coming in,
Yeah.
I mean, I literally can go back to
Hmm.
1972 and 1973 when I worked
Hmm.
in a quote unquote autism program in Buffalo
Yeah.
Children's Hospital at the time.
Yeah.
And I was a green speech language pathologist with a
Yeah.
very experienced teacher. And we had the
Yeah.
parents coming in, and I learned how to be
Yes.
partners in creating a
Oh,
classroom community.
it is
And I'll
the
never forget
most.
that.
It is. My very first job was in New York City, and I co-taught for 2 years, and they are to this day two of the best years I ever taught, because like these people become your family, and you realize that the different expertise of a classroom teacher versus a special educator, and how you need both of them to do this work. It's so valuable, and once you do it, you're like, well, inclusion makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion makes sense. And the fear, and this comes with just general like enrollment, understanding inclusion as enrollment. It also happens is that if we just focus on people sharing space, it contaminates the efforts. So
Mm-hmm.
whether that's just students sharing space or teachers sharing space, people have a contaminated understanding of what co-teaching is and what
Mm-hmm.
inclusion is, which gets in the way. And so just like meaningful inclusion, meaningful co-teaching, it is so powerful when those supports are put into place for people to do it in ways that are authentic and meaningful, and not just breathing the same air.
And planful and intentional, as you
Planful and
stated earlier.
intentional. And
Yes.
because like no, if you've been in that situation, you know how powerful it is and how much learning can happen
Mm-hmm.
and how manageable it is. Like
And the
it's
kid
so manageable.
and the kids know it.
Oh, the kids know it. Like those 2 years, like I felt like those classes were family to me.
Mm-hmm.
Family. And now that
And
I have my own family, like that's it. Like you go through life with these people, like somehow the power dynamics change between adults and kids, and you learn together, and it's this collaborative community that is unlike any other. When you get it right, it's gold.
mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
golden.
Well,
Oh,
I
what a
think
day.
I
What
think
a
this
day.
podcast has been gold. So thank you from our
Until
hearts.
until next time.
Until
Yes.
next time, you will be one of our repeat guests. I can
Oh,
already,
no doubt
I can
about it.
feel it.
Yes. Thank you,
All
Shelley.
right.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Be well.
See ya.